So I'm going to start by just a little bit of an audience poll. So please raise hands if you are a scientist. Okay, a couple. An engineer. An inventor. A maker. An entrepreneur, businessman or woman. Cool. So in 2000, NASA published a paper where they were using infrared light to make plants grow quicker in space. A few years later, when I discovered this at sixth form, I found it fascinating. I thought if these effects were seen on plant cells, then perhaps similar effects on human and animal cells would also be observed. Wounds could be healed quicker, infection rates could be reduced, and potentially, lives could be saved. I was also really quite fascinated by whale neurology, but unsurprisingly, trying to persuade someone to let you put a whale inside an MRI scanner doesn't go down too well. So fast forward 4 years, NASA, Harvard Medical School have been continuing to find new applications for infrared treatments. They varied from injury prevention through to potential cancer therapies. The Japanese had documented 171% increases in the rates of cutaneous wound healing. And meanwhile, I was coming to the end of a study into the biological effects of infrared radiation on equine locomotion. Not quite on a par with NASA or Harvard, but the first in a series of what would have proved to be pivotal steps in the creation of a model that would make medical innovation more sustainable for a startup. Rough estimates at the time were telling me that it was going to take roughly 3 to 5 years and £1.5 million worth of funding to take the technology I was working on at university and further develop it and certify it as a medical product. The time is not such an issue, but for someone who doesn't have the funds, nor really at the time knew mechanisms to gain the funds, the costs are hugely inhibitive. Some of you may have come across this either in academic research or under your own businesses. So this was where my belief that there was a better way came in. I'll start by saying that this may not be applicable to every single medical technology. But for many of them, and especially the non-invasive ones, there are opportunities to commercialise elsewhere, such as the sportswear market or health and wellness. They are a lot less strictly regulated, which means that the crippling costs of randomised controlled trials and independent studies aren't as inhibitive. In my case, I was working with a yarn-based technology called Salient, and what this does is it absorbs waste energy from the body, and it converts this into a very specific region of the infrared spectrum. That's then re-emitted, where it penetrates about 4 centimetres back into your soft tissue and causes a number of biological reactions. Medically speaking, we can treat chronic disorders such as arthritis, Raynaud's disease, diabetic neuropathic foot pain. We're working with stroke victims to accelerate their rehabilitation. And one day, as I mentioned earlier, I hope that we'll move into wound dressings. But the technology is equally as applicable on the sportswear market as a performance and recovery aid. So by combining the two needs, we were able to develop this model. Today, the technology is used on every continent around the world by our customers. We do have 10 independently run trials that have been published on the efficacy of the tech and our products. They carry medical status in the EU and Australasia, and recently the FDA granted the technology as a medical device, the first yarn to ever gain such an achievement. We're now developing the technology to work with electronics as well, so we can generate the next range of our smart garments. And my point to telling you this about the business is that none of this would have been possible without this sportswear brand serving as a point to fund the ongoing R&D. When I first started, I was quite shy about having this dual model. People would ask me one of two questions. To start with, it was always, why can't you just be happy having a successful sportswear brand? And the second one, which came later on, was, you're working with all these really cool technologies, why are you doing really boring stuff like making socks? The answer to the first question is another belief of mine, and that's that if you have the resources, the ideas, or the team to create lasting and impactful change, you have a duty to do so. And the answer to the second one is quite simple: sustainability. If we didn't have the sportswear brand acting as a point for us to engage with the consumer market, we would have been in the same position that I was when I was a student, saying, how the hell am I going to fund this? The sportswear brand to start with was just a stepping stone, but it grew to become the bedrock that the rest of the company had been built around. It's allowed my team and myself to become and establish ourselves as experts in our fields. As I mentioned, it's currently funding the ongoing research, and importantly for the next technologies, it will provide a direct route to market so that we can repeat the cycle and it can become self-perpetuating. As a slight aside, when I talk about the next technologies, what we're now doing is we're embedding electronics into yarns so that we can create smart fabrics. Our ultimate goal is to create a garment that's powered by the wearer and can detect the precursors to a medical emergency such as a heart attack, diagnose this, and then transmit the data with the location to the emergency services, reducing response time and saving the wearer's life. But doing this and everything we've done without that sportswear brand goes back to the traditional model of medical innovation. By its very nature, it has very high burn rates. From concept through to a final product, there can be 5 to 10 years worth of no revenue whatsoever, which means that the companies are entirely reliant on external funding. And this funding comes with much higher risk levels. Some companies may never make it to market. Some might make it to market and never gain significant traction. But if you're able to commercialize early and bring that revenue generation forwards, then you can do all of the development in a more sustainable fashion. You've proved that your market fit is there. And then when it comes to the next phase, you're able to potentially bring that forward as well. Investors like to call companies like this, like mine, cockroaches. Personally, I prefer to say a Centurion tank for obvious reasons, but the point is survivability. In this scenario, we could take a nuke, i.e. not getting the funding externally, and the company will still grow, scale, and achieve the goals that they've set out. A little timeline of how we grew with my business, but ultimately, to do this, your core technology needs to be transferable, and you need to have thought about its different potentials from the word go. So I'm going to make a request to the audience, to any scientists, engineers, makers, thinkers, innovators, inventors watching, that when you next look into your next project, think about all of its different potentials. Think about how you can realize those potentials strategically so that they reinforce one another. Make your innovation more sustainable, and in doing so, potentially increase the impact that that product or technology can have. Thank you very much. I'll speak to you later.